So back in 2015, I remember hearing the first rumors of this new Dublin development, the downtown that was going to be happening on the other side of the river. At that time there was just an old shopping center and an old Wendy's and a Tim Hortons, and it was hard with this old car wash that was there to envision what they were talking about. And then they started talking about the roundabout, this roundabout that was going to go at the intersection of Riverside and 161. And then they started saying you should go to Dublin City's website because there's this virtual tour of what this is all going to look like in the future. And so I remember going on there and clicking on it, and you could see this virtual tour that would fly you down these streets. And it was just hard, impossible to imagine. Can you believe that this is what they're saying is coming to this area? And I remember running around with a camera and taking pictures of how it used to be because I wanted to capture at that time what it used to look like. And I remember going right down here by the river. None of this was here. It was woods and just taking pictures of the river and taking pictures of the buildings that were over here. And here we are today. This amazing downtown that exists, this Bridge Park. Great things like pens and great things like 16-bit and this cool new, suspension bridge. I mean, if you ever wondered what 20 million would buy you, there you go, right there. But it's this amazing thing that just transformed, that we're living now. We're living that virtual picture now. They were able to see it exactly how it was going to be. They knew right where that bridge was going to be. Put it all together. It's amazing. Well, as we think about the prophets and we think about these people, we think about people that are speaking to a future that God is speaking to a people. The prophets were, in that time, they were the voice of God. They were speaking on behalf of God. And yeah, in most cases, I think when we think of them, we think of people that were speaking of destruction and judgment that were coming. And that was what they were speaking about. They were speaking to a people that had removed themselves so far from God that their lives were so destructive to them and so destructive to people around them that God's looking at this and going, I cannot continue to have my hand on these people and let this happen. There is judgment that has to come for this. And so these prophets were speaking to these people and telling them this is what's coming. And speaking to them and telling them this is how you're living. But they also were always, the great thing was they were always speaking about, I think, a God whose hand was out. The foundation in all this is that the prophets communicate God's love. That there's this God who saw how they were living, couldn't let it continue. Yes, judgment was coming, but there's this God going, but that's not what I want. And I do see a day in the future where that won't be the case, where we will be able to be together, we'll be able to be in relationship, that way you're living will be removed. And in some cases with the prophets, it was something that was right then in that day, foretelling a judgment and that was coming in that time. For some of them, it was speaking, if you look at Isaiah, it was speaking to right then a people that were living a certain way, a judgment that was coming, but it was also speaking to a better future in the Messiah that would come and change the future for everyone. For all of us who are away from God, there's this hand of God communicating his love. It was communicating that I'm a God who sees this sin and this stuff that separates us from each other, that brings destruction in your life, and it's not what I want. I want there to be a better day. And so it spoke to that. We have Hosea, who was living a visual picture of Israel's relationship with their God. You can look at Jonah, and Jonah to me is the clearest picture of this God who speaks of destruction that's coming, who speaks of judgment that's coming for the way a people are living. People that in these cases were, living so far apart from God. You hear about the widows and orphans and how they didn't care about them anymore. And you even hear about how widows and orphans weren't living for him and were living evil lives. And so it was this whole just mess. And here's God saying to the Ninevites, I'm going to bring destruction. Speaks it through Jonah. And then when these people repent, acknowledge their sin, repent of it at great lengths, God removes that hand of judgment and says, I hear you, I see you, I love you, and he removes that. And I believe that is the message of the prophets, that it's communicating the love of God. And so tonight, you guys are going to look at some different scriptures and some different passages and talk about that. But Love you guys. Hope everything's going well. Hope you guys have a great D team, and we'll see you next week.